Do you want to be a more successful leader of your company or any organization? I'm Rick Williams. Welcome to the Create the Future podcast. I have guests come on my podcast to share their stories about making difficult decisions that determine the future of their company. We learn what worked, what didn't work, and we have a little fun along the way. You will be a more successful leader if you listen to and learn from these stories. So I have a great guest today, and I'm excited to get started. Lisa Woodruff is the founder and CEO of Organize 365. Through her Productive Helm Solutions course, she teaches America's young and old the skills of organizing and unlocking their time for what they are uniquely created to do. Lisa shares strategies for reducing the feeling of being overwhelmed, clearing the mental clutter, and living a productive and organized life. Her goal is to free people from the monotonous tasks of daily living and unlock their time for what they are uniquely created to bring forth into the world. Lisa is the author of 4 books, including How ADHD Affects Home Organization and The Paper Solution. Lisa is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So Lisa, welcome to the Create the Future podcast. Get us started by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey up to this point.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. And you did a great job introducing me. The funny thing is, the longer you're in business, especially a business that you have created from scratch, like I did, Organize 365,
Yeah.
the company has grown and evolved with me as I have grown and evolved. And I did start out as an in-home professional organizer. But over the last almost 15 years now, my understanding of what it takes to actually run a household and the systems that just don't even exist for us as household managers, which I've created over time, has really grown into my understanding of how really highly productive households function and how we as humans all have cobbled together of our own effort to make that productive household. So if your household is not productive, it's not a you problem. It's a systems problem. Like literally, there is no school to go to. There are no systems to buy. There is no solution on the marketplace to have you be a productive household manager. And so that's what I have kind of created over the last 15 years. So if I go all the way back to my childhood, which I always do, I was the oldest grandchild on both sides of large families. So I was always inside of a lot of households. I love the bustling of the big households. My dad was the oldest of 6. So I had aunts and uncles that were, just 10, 14 years older than me. So they were still being raised when I was little. And then my profession of choice in high school was being a babysitter. And I babysat more than 40 hours a week in high school and college. So I really became an integral part of these other households and running these other households. I got a degree in early childhood and elementary education, taught for a few years. And during that time, I went into households and I was teaching preschool. So we had to do home visits. We were making sure that the kids actually lived in the district and also making sure that they were not in abusive situations. So I saw much more impoverished conditions at that time. And again, hundreds of homes that I went into. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for a decade, which is all I ever wanted to be. I just wanted to have babies and I wanted to stay home. And I was blessed with the adoption of 2 kids. My husband and I have raised those 2 kids. It was the best decade of my life. And then at the age of 40, I started Organize 365. And that was when I was really starting to wrestle with what is my adult career going to be beyond being a stay-at-home mom? My kids were in middle school. They needed me, but they didn't need me all the time. What was I uniquely gifted and created to do in addition to being a wife and mother? And that's when I started Organize 365. I had no idea how I'd make money. I just knew I could talk about organizing for the rest of my life. So I did that in-home organizing for 3 years. Then a team did the in-home organizing for 3 years while I started my podcast. Then I created courses and started patenting and manufacturing the products we need for household managers. And most recently, I just went back and got a PhD in applied psychology. And our next iteration of Organize 365 will be doing academic level research with the goal of bringing to light what household managers need in order to be productive and functioning.
Okay, I have to say that you just mentioned, oh, by the way, in passing, you got your PhD
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a huge step that most people will not think of as, oh, by the way, I did that sort of along the way, and it wasn't a
Yes.
big deal. I mean, tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that.
Yeah, I think, your big question is what are your challenges and critical decisions that you make? And no one listening to this podcast isn't a professional oriented lifelong learner. Like that's pretty much who podcast listeners are, which is definitely me. And so as I kept growing Organized 365 and I was, I have a podcast, I have courses, I have all these different things. I want to grow me as a human. So I do masterminds and I do all of those things, but what would really grow me as a person? And I realized that I was having a lot of conversations about household managers on the podcast, in the books that I write, even on TV and things like that. But the truth of the matter is, the company probably won't survive me, and most companies don't. And the work that I do is making an impact today, but it probably won't make an impact in the future. However, when you put something in academia, like the cheaper by the dozen lady, Lillian Gilbreth, was a psychologist. So we still know about her because her research in psychology is still being built on today. So, how do I take what I'm doing in the marketplace that's making a fair wage for my family and I now, but also give forward to the future? Like, how do I take the learnings of the fact that a household is an economic entity, we need systems, and really pay it forward so that this research that I'm doing now in commerce actually makes its way into academia so that we aren't continually reinventing the wheel at home. I find we're continually reinventing the wheel at home because we're isolated in our own households. We don't know what other people are doing, and we're not taking the time to put it in some kind of a medium that will live on beyond us.
Well, that's wonderful. There's a whole separate conversation about legacy here, and
Yes.
you're thinking about your own legacy, not just solving the problems that you have had experienced in your own life and your own family,
Mhm.
but how can what you've learned live on and others can benefit? I think that's terrific. I think it's amazing in a way that you thought about legacy at a relatively early stage in life, as opposed to people later on saying, okay, what was the meaning of all of this and what do I have to
Yeah.
um, pass on or share with that will survive. So
Thank
anyway,
you
I
for
think
that.
that's great. It's a good way of
Yeah.
thinking about it. So I know you wanted to come on my Create the Future podcast and talk
Yeah.
about a difficult decision, or maybe some other decisions, more than one decision, but basically a difficult decision you had to make for yourself that had a
Mhm.
big impact on, your professional career and
Mhm.
how you went about making that. So tell us a little bit about that story.
So I'm 54 years old now. When I look back on the decision to get a PhD, which the family was like, "Why are you getting a PhD?" I was like, "Well, because I want to." It would almost be more acceptable if I said I wanted to run a marathon. That's going to take a lot of time of practice and running a marathon. People are on the finish line, they're cheering you on. But when you say you want to do something nerdy, like get a PhD or write a book, people are like, why are you doing that? That's so boring. And so they weren't like, yay, mom's going to spend 25 hours a week getting a PhD, like for 3.5 years. So there was getting a PhD, even starting the company when I was 40, making the decision to start the company. A lot of these decisions that I made were difficult because they changed the order of priority in my household. What I mean by that is when
Hmm.
I was a stay-at-home mom, my children were number one on the priority. And then my husband will say the dog was next, and then he was after that. He's always saying he's at the bottom of the list. But the truth of the matter is, I was at the bottom of the list because it was the kids and the household and the dog and my husband, like all of these, and church and volunteering and being at the kids' school, like all of these things made it on the to-do list. But my personal goals, there wasn't time for me to do personal goals and development and being in a mastermind like when I was raising the kids, because I was raising the kids because I had to, care for them. And while I was caring for them, I cared for the house and all of the other things that I did. And I lovingly did this and I loved doing it. Like I loved doing it. But I didn't do a lot for my own personal growth and development. And I got this idea somewhere along the way that self care was like the fact that I took a bubble bath every night, which sometimes was 4 minutes. This summer I had one that was 4 hours long. Don't worry about it. But I've always taken a bubble bath. But that's pampering. That's not really self care. And when I think about how I care for my children or how we care for our elderly parents and grandparents in our household, There's a different intent to that care. And you think about the person as a whole, what they need at that time, not just their food and their clothing, but also their professional development, their emotional development, their spiritual development, their relational development. Like you would never have a child and not enroll them in any extracurricular activities. You know what I mean? Like you would find a
Mhm.
way to develop and give that child those outlets. But we tend to not do that in our early adult years because we don't have the money or we don't have the time and we're prioritizing other people.
Right.
So the biggest thing I realized when I started the company at 40, when I went back to get the PhD at 50, was in making those big decisions, which, yes, there's a financial implication in the first one. I really was saying to my family, I am reorienting how I'm spending my time. And there's going to be a significant amount of my time that will not be available at your discretion. That it is going to go towards this income earning production, or it's going to go towards this learning that I'm going to do. And I'm going to be a new person when I'm done with all of this learning. I will have different capabilities that I will then be able to have for the rest of my life. But there really is no benefit to my grandchildren, my children, or my husband that I got a PhD. You see what I'm saying? So in that way, it's selfish because it is for me and it is not for them. And I'm not in a corporate position where I'm now making more money because I have my PhD. I'm self-employed. So it actually costs me money to get my PhD, and it will cost me money to do the research because I'm not going to get a grant. I'm going to fund it myself. So it's actually not a financial win at all. So in the way that the world measures things, or possibly your family measures things, these are all negatives. But for me as a human, a lifelong learner, someone with, significance is one of my biggest strengths and strengths finders. Like I am a sad, wilting Lisa if I am not growing and developing myself in a meaningful way all of the time. And in that way, it is selfish because it is self-focused. And in my latest book, Escaping Quicksand, I've defined self-care because we don't have a good operational definition of self-care. I know that now because I have a PhD. So I've defined adult self-care as the support of an adult's educational, spiritual, emotional, and relational needs, in addition to the provision of life-sustaining care, including feeding, bathing, clothing, and medical care. Meaning that I care for myself now in the same way that I care for my husband, my children, and my grandchildren. And I don't over prioritize myself over them, but I don't under prioritize myself either.
Mhm.
So when I'm thinking about the nutrition for our whole family, I wouldn't feed the newborn milk when he needs formula. And I wouldn't feed myself a high carb diet because I'm past menopause and I'll be the size of a blimp. So, I'm going to make sure that everyone's needs are met.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry, I talk a lot. I'll talk less.
No, 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 no. This is great. I got to tell you, I am hearing what you're saying in several different dimensions at once. I want to go back to your experience deciding you were going to change the priorities of how you spent your time and commitments in
Yeah.
your family structure. But let me just say something to you about how I hear what you're saying in a completely different context. So, I say that in my writing and speaking, I say that you are the CEO. If you're the CEO, you're the CEO of
Yes.
the company, but forget what the title is. It could be division manager, general manager, group manager, team manager, whatever the heck the title is. You
Hmm.
are that have that title and role. You're also responsible for yourself as an individual. And they are two very different roles.
Yeah.
And too often people don't see them as different roles. They, for a whole bunch of reasons, I'm just going to give you a quick version of this. Uh, if you are the CEO, and I don't be hung up on that word CEO, but just means leader. If you're the
Hmm.
leader of your organization, you might be the best person to be in that role today or 5 years ago, or let's say you were a year ago or 5 years ago, but as the company has grown or changed or diminished or whatever, you might not be the best person today.
Yeah.
And you have to separate yourself from who you are as the leader of your organization from who you are as an individual and where you are in your own personal career and professional path. So the company may have gone through a cycle, a change cycle that makes you, even though you're very skilled, not the right
Hmm.
leader at that point. it also may not be the right position for you and where you are in your own life. You may want to move to a situation where you're less challenged or moving towards retirement, or you may be
Yes.
great at doing a startup and hate all of the organization and everything and systematizing that's required to go from a startup to a growth phase company. All of those things change about what's required for success as a leader in the organization where it is today and where it's going to next year and the next 5 years. And anyway, so I tend to think about that as a as I'm talking with people about how they can be more successful as a leader of their organization. And it's exactly the same principles that you're talking about. And I got to tell you, if you also think that you know everything about how to make your organization work and you can make all good decisions just based on, what you already know, you are bound
Yeah.
to lose and be a
Yeah.
failure over time. That if you're not a learner, as you're talking about it, and open to learning from other people, you are certain to fail and not adapt and change and grow as the leader of your organization. So I'm only bringing all this up because you're talking about your role in a household, being a
Mhm.
continuing learner, and that exactly the same skills are required to be the leader in any successful organization. So I don't know if you've thought about that,
Correct.
but that is
Yes.
exactly what you're saying.
Yes, I call us the productive home CEOs because we have to have that strategic lens. And often because in a business, the benefit of being in a business, there are many solopreneur businesses, but as you have product market fit and profitability, you usually start to grow a team, even if it's a small team. And so when you have a vision that team members come and work in your company in order to help you achieve that vision, you're all working towards the same end. And then you can divide the labor in order to have that transformation for your customers. In a household level, you can elevate yourself in your mindset to the leader, which you should, and have self-actualization at home. The problem is, even when you live with other people, they may not be predictable employees. So you're doing the work and you're doing the management work and you're doing the strategic CEO work. So you're doing all levels of leadership and work inside of a household and or managing the delegation of that. And to your point, as businesses grow and change and evolve, you have to become a new leader. What I'm finding as a household manager is I never thought about retirement until recently. It wasn't until recently that we were really taking care of elder care. We talk a lot about parenting, but a lot of people don't ever become parents. And yet we all have parents. So most of us will be in a situation where we need to provide elder care, but we don't really talk about that. Most of us will end up settling someone's estate, but we don't talk about that either. And so as we go through our lives of living in households, the work that we do changes, the resources that we have financially, energy changes, just like in market conditions. And the United States household is responsible for 68% of US GDP. So we are an economic entity. We are a business. So if you can apply business principles to what we do in the household, it changes the language from this is all volunteer and unpaid to no, there's an economic impact to what we're doing here. So let's use some of these business principles of prioritizing the right things and setting and attaining goals and being strategic thinkers instead of just going with the flow. Like you are the flow in your house. Somebody's got to make the flow.
Okay, what I'm trying to get you to encourage, I'm trying to encourage you, or not encourage you really, but encourage people who are listening to this to realize that the skills required for success as the leader of your household are exactly the same skills that are
Yep.
required for you to be a successful leader of $1 billion company. And they're exactly the same.
Yes.
I mean, the implementation might be a little different, but the basic principles are exactly the same. Well, let's spend a little moment and learn more about your personal experience
Hmm.
deciding to make what's a very important priority change in how you were living your life, your relationship with your kids, your dog, your husband,
Yeah.
um, talk about your experience saying, "Oh my gosh, should I really do this? Should I not do this?" How did you go about making this the decision to do what you ended up doing?
Yeah, so I think I'll so many decisions I've made, but I think the most concrete and recent one would be the decision to get a PhD. So I
Okay.
had been talking, a decade ago with the dean at a university. Our kids were going to the same school and we carpooled and I said to her, "Yeah, I think I'll get a PhD someday." She's like, "No, Lisa, you can't get a PhD. You're too big picture. They'll break you. You can't get a PhD." And then my sister-in-law got a PhD. And I was like, "Oh, Paige, I want to get a PhD." She goes, "Don't get a PhD. Like it's so much work. It's by the end, like you don't even want to talk about your work anymore. Don't get a PhD." I was like, "Okay, I'm definitely getting a PhD." So I went to this school. I went to an online school called Fielding Graduate University, and they had like a Zoom webinar every month. And I went every single month to talk to the dean that was, in the program. And I watched the webinar over and over and over again. And I kept saying, "How many hours is this going to be? How many? Like, give me a number. I need a number." And she was like, "It's like 25 hours a week." And I'm like, "Oh, is it really 25 hours a week? Or could it possibly be 20? Like, could I do it faster?" You're always thinking you could do it faster. So I was like, "All right, it's going to be 25 hours a week." So I really thought about it. At the time, my grandson who lives with us, my daughter and grandson who live with us, he was about 6 to 9 months old. Such an easy baby, really, really good baby. There are easy kids and hard kids, and this kid, easy kid. We've had a second kid now, not so easy. And now my daughter's like, "Oh, I understand what you were saying when you said he was a dream child." Yeah, he was a dream baby. The company was in a good place. Revenue was doing well. Our products were doing well. I was starting to get bored. I was turning 50. My kids were, adults now, even though we had the grandbaby. And I just had so much excess time and capacity. So what I did was I went through my calendar and I looked at the past year and I found where would I have been able to find 25 hours a week and what would I have to eliminate in order to do that for 3 to 4 years in the future. So I got rid of all the masterminds I was in and the traveling that I did for conferences. I worked late 2 nights a week and 6 hours on Saturdays. And I put that out in my calendar and I blocked all that time for the next year. And I looked at it and I was like, will I still be able to keep up with my team, with my podcasting? Will I still have meaningful time with my daughter and my grandson? Will I still go on dates with my husband? Someone counseled me that you better take trips with your husband very often if you're going to do this. So I scheduled trips every time the school was going to have a break. And I mapped it out on my calendar and I was like, okay, well, if I reduce my office hours down to 30 hours and I add this 25 hours and I stick to my schedule, I will be able to make it happen. So I applied, I was accepted, and I started school. The first trimester, 120 days, was really rough because I was in a weeding out program. I was actually in a certification to even be eligible to apply to the school because I didn't have a master's. And so I was working probably more like 35 hours a week then. And I had no idea any of this academic language. It was like a completely foreign language to me. I'm a big picture podcaster person, entrepreneur, and I'm not an academic. So I had to learn a lot of things. But by the time I got to the third semester and I was in the school and I'd figured out like this is when you register for classes, these are the better professors for me, that kind of a thing. I just kind of was in my groove. But it was a long 3.5 years. And I made the decision because my family they liked having me around and doing for them, but they didn't really need me to do it anymore.
Mhm.
And I intuited that this would be a really great time for me to do this. Like everyone in our family was healthy. We didn't know if there would be more grandbabies or weddings on the horizon, like it seemed to have the capacity right now. Now we do have two grandbabies. There was one born towards the end of that PhD time. I'm really glad I did it. It was really good timing. I got through it.
No, 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 that's great. I am acknowledging the obvious in that you're a woman and I'm a guy, and I'm going to talk a
Okay.
little bit of difference between guys and
Okay.
gals in this
Great.
context. But did you have professional colleagues, the staff you were working with that you talked about it? Did you talk with your husband about this? Did you talk about who did you talk to
Mm,
help to bring them into your process of deciding what you're really going to do here? I'm hearing how you went through the mechanics of,
yeah.
gee, how can I make this work? But you had to make an emotional
Yeah.
decision that said, okay, I'm going to really change how my life. I'm going to change my relationship with my
Yeah.
husband, my kid,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
dog. How did you
Yeah.
do that?
I think a couple of things. Number one, I only worked for anyone for a couple of years, my first years of teaching.
Yeah.
Other than that, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in direct sales, 23 different direct sales companies. I've
Hmm.
started many companies. Like this one has been the longest one, obviously, at 14 and a half years. So I've always usually been in charge of my earning potential, my schedule, my goal setting. And for the first 50 years of my life, I have prioritized the needs of others and I have, folded myself into a pretzel in order to make sure that everyone around me was able to set and achieve their goals. And I was also going through menopause at the time. This is a productive way to go through menopause, ladies. And I decided that I really wanted something for me, like something that was going to grow and develop me as a person and my growth and development in the company. Like my husband's very supportive of what I do inside of my company, but he will say, I have no idea what you're doing. I don't understand why people pay you on the internet. I don't know why you're always talking into a microphone and that thousands of people listen to you on a podcast. I don't get it. He goes, I just don't even understand what you're doing and why you need a PhD for it. I was like, I don't. I don't need a PhD for it, but I want a PhD for it. And the way that I motivate myself to do things is I do talk to people about it. So I talked to a lot of people about this idea. And my sister-in-law had gotten a PhD. So I had watched her do it. I knew it was hard, but I watched how much time she spent. I remember hearing what she had said about it. I had watched another woman when my kids were in high school. She went back to school and she got her law degree, and now she's a local judge. And I was like, oh my gosh, you could like go back to school when your kids are in school. Like it was just like an example of what is possible for a woman doing it and still
Hmm.
being a good wife, member of the community, all those things, parent. And so I thought, well, if they can do it, I can probably do it. And I want to try and see if I can. And then once I tell people I'm going to do it, well, I can't fail. Like I just told thousands of people I'm doing this and they're watching me every single day doing it. So I need to be an example to them of what is possible. But truly, what I told you in the beginning is the driving force. If I was just getting a PhD so that I could have the letters behind my name so that people could call me doctor, I probably would not have succeeded. But
Hmm.
because I am doing this so that the tools that I have patented and developed can then be studied in academia to potentially help more people beyond just the paying members that I have inside of my company, that is a really big why. So if the why is big enough, you will do whatever is necessary in order to achieve the goal. So honestly, it's my customers and my audience who's been encouraging me along the way. They
Hmm.
help me find my external reader. They're constantly sending me academic articles that they think are related to the work that we're doing because they feel like we are collectively doing it. Um, but as far as talking to like family members, they're surprised that I was able to do it. They're excited and proud of me, but it was not in their wheelhouse. If it was up to them, they'd be like, no, don't do that. Why are you doing that? Don't do that.
Right. Well, okay. So again, I acknowledge that you're a gal and I'm a guy, and uh, guys have a lot more difficulty talking with other
Mm.
people and saying, "Gee, I'm not
Oh.
really sure what I should do here. Can you give me your thinking or
Mm.
share your experience dealing with a similar issue?" I personally belong to what we call a forum group. It's a group
Oh,
of
yes.
8 or 10
Hmm.
people, similar to Vistage or IPO or something like that,
Hmm.
and where we can bring issues or challenges. It could be personal or work or whatever, and
Yeah.
ask for the groups to share their experience dealing with it. And one of the values of being part of this group is it's very difficult for guys to do that.
Hmm.
Now, we do have women in the group, but one of the things that becomes really clear over time is that women are much more at ease with talking with each other about kind of any of this stuff. I mean, just the way you're talking about it, that
Mm.
of opening themselves to what they're really experiencing and say, hey, well, what happened? How did you deal with this? So that sort of thing. I mean, have
Hmm.
you, and that's part of the reason why since it's obvious who
Yeah.
you are and you're in your leadership role is a core women's role for the most part, kind of what your experience is with that as a resource in your life.
Okay, interesting. That made me think about tactics versus permission. And I didn't talk about how I made the decision with my team. So I told my team that I was considering doing this PhD. They were all very supportive. I said, okay, well, if I do this, I'm going to reduce my work hours by 10 hours per week. And then I'm adding, another 15 hours for this. So I'll work 54 hours a week, which I did. And they took on different roles and responsibilities. We also knew there was a possibility of the revenue in the company going down because I am the face of the brand and most of what I do is interviews. And, I wouldn't have the capacity for that and to create new products during this time. And thank goodness the revenue of the company just stayed the entire time. It just remained the same revenue, which was just such a blessing. So I had their buy-in. I remember I was like in year two and I came out of my office and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, get back in there and write your paper. So like, and there is something like, they'd be like, why are you out here talking to us? I'm like, well, I just kind of need a break. And they're like, get back in there and do your work. So they really held me accountable. It was really nice for them to be like, I think you're supposed to be doing some school project right now. You cannot talk to us. So that was great. But when you're talking about men versus women, accountability groups, I have not really thought about, I'd like to think about that more. I actually have done so much research with women. I know that that is one of my limitations is I'm not really looking at men and how they approach some of these things, which eventually I'll get to it. I'm going to work till I'm 80. It'll be fine. But I think that when I think about when I'm talking to women or when I was talking to women about making this decision, I was looking for confirmation that I'd be able to do it because I'm not a detail-oriented person. And academia is a very detail-oriented field. I kept saying, but I'm not detailed. They're like, yeah, but your ideas are big enough and worthy enough to do the work to get the PhD. Once you have the PhD, you can hire all the editors you need. I was like, that's all they had to say was that I was going to be able to hire people. I was like, great. All I have to do is learn the knowledge and then I can hire people. That was great. But when I'm usually talking to women, I'm talking tactics. And the reason why, Rick, is because all women are running two entities. They're running the household and the business. So when I said I was getting a PhD, I was saying I'm going to run three entities. I'm going to run our household, I'm going to run the business as the CEO, and I'm going to get a PhD. Because running the household has a lot of invisible work, and academia will support that women are doing that more than men. However, I would say the caveat to that is unless you're a household of just a man, like my son, or when my dad was widowed, or not widowed, divorced, sometimes if you're the only member, you have to be doing the visible and the invisible work, which I don't think is talked about enough in academia. But women are always thinking about the care of others, the care of the household, and then also their economic impact through the work that they do. And then getting a PhD means that they also are taking more time and economic resources away. Whereas what I have observed may not be true, but what I have observed is men just make a decision and go for it. Like they don't really think about all the household ramifications of that decision, whereas a woman will.
Right. No, that's a very good point. Well, look, before we wrap up, what would you say are the key takeaways or recommendations you would make for people in your position who are facing a difficult decisions like you had to make? And what do you recommend that they do to kind of make the right decision for them, go through the whatever the process that you think is most effective?
I think at the end of the day, you take you with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So when you're going to bed at night, if you don't fall asleep instantly, or when you're waking up on a weekend day and you don't have to rush off to something, you're just laying there quietly alone, pretending to be asleep. This is when I always do it, pretending to be asleep. Ask yourself these two questions and see what comes up. Number one, what do you want? Like, what do you want? And then why do you want that? And when you know what you want and why you want it, then you can really go after it because just like with you, I'm able to articulate it to you, to my husband, to my team, to my community. I'm very clear on what I wanted and why I wanted it. And both of those really resonated with me. It wasn't like I wanted it, but I didn't know why, or it was going to give this outcome, but I really didn't want to do the work. Like both things really aligned and
Mhm.
I could feel them in my soul. So then I just had to do the work to make it manifest.
Okay, this has been a terrific conversation. So, Lisa, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your experiences. I know you've made a valuable contribution to everybody who's listening to this. So if somebody wants to learn more about you and what you're doing and even contact you, how can they do that?
Thanks, Rick. My company is called Organize 365. So all my resources are at organize365.com. The podcast is also called Organize 365. And I'm most active on Instagram if you want to DM me at Organize 365.
All right. Well, that's great. I want to end up here by thanking our audience for listening in. I hope you found this to be a valuable contribution for you. I'm certainly there's been lots of opportunities for you to learn and how to be a better leader of your organization. I hope you found our discussion compelling, valuable, and also engaging. I have two requests. The first request is that you follow this podcast on your favorite podcast channel. By following the podcast, you'll hear when the next podcast episode is out. Second, if you have a compelling story to tell about tough decisions you had to make, come on the podcast as a guest. Go to rickwilliamsleadership.com and then go to the podcast page on the website. Again, that's rickwilliamsleadership.com. Be well.